My sister coldly texted, "Don't bother showing up. We're cutting ties." I texted back, "Okay." Then I quietly pulled my fund from the family business. She thought they could count on my cousin. But 1 week later, they were all panicking. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I got the email on a Tuesday afternoon. Your services are no longer required. Severance details to follow. I didn't argue or beg. I simply forwarded it to my attorney, and then quietly pulled my seed funding from the startup. They thought my cousin could handle the technical side. 3 months later, their investors were running for the exits. Hey Reddit, I spent 8 years building my sister's tech company from nothing. Then she fired me with a 2-sentence email and handed my CTO position to our cousin. I didn't fight back publicly. I just withdrew my personal investment and watched as everything fell apart. They bet on the wrong horse. Here's what happened. My 32F sister Elena started her cybersecurity firm in a cramped Seattle apartment back in 2015. 8 years later, it was handling $6.8 million in annual contracts with offices in Seattle and Portland. I'd been there since day one, first writing code alone while Elena networked for clients, then building the engineering team after our Series A, and finally architecting our flagship security platform that landed us 3 Fortune 500 clients. The business was quintessential tech startup, specialized penetration testing, custom security solutions, and a SaaS platform that monitored for vulnerabilities in real time. We worked with healthcare systems, financial institutions, and government contractors, organizations where data breaches could mean life or death, not just PR headaches. Our client list included some of the top healthcare networks in the Pacific Northwest. Elena never missed a chance to tell investors how she built everything from scratch, conveniently omitting the $150,000 from our grandfather's estate that funded the first year. She left that detail out of her founder story. Adjusted for inflation and Seattle's tech ecosystem, that's roughly $250,000 of initial capital she never had to hustle for. Not exactly the bootstrapped narrative she pushed. My cousin Zoe, 26F, was another story entirely. While I was pulling all-nighters fixing critical security flaws, she was getting her MBA at Stanford, courtesy of her parents. When she finally joined the company 2 years ago, Elena created a Chief Strategy Officer title for her, despite her total lack of cybersecurity experience. My Aunt Vivian, Elena's godmother, was Zoe's biggest champion. When Zoe wanted a company car to meet with potential clients, it was Vivian who convinced Elena it was necessary, while I was still taking the bus or using rideshare apps to client meetings. She never advocated for me the way she did for Zoe. Zoe's MBA focused on entrepreneurship, which essentially meant she'd spent 2 years networking with venture capitalists and creating PowerPoint presentations. Her resume consisted of 1 summer internship at a marketing agency, where her sorority sister's mother was the CMO. Yet somehow Elena believed she was qualified to shape strategy at a specialized cybersecurity firm. I still remember when Zoe showed her true colors. We'd been courting a major healthcare system for months, and I'd spent weeks customizing our platform for their specific compliance needs. We're talking 2 a.m. coding sessions, weekends lost to testing, my boyfriend ultimately breaking things off because I was married to my work. On the day of our final pitch to their CISO and security team, Zoe arrived 15 minutes late, hijacked my presentation, and introduced herself as the architect of this security partnership. When the client asked specific questions about implementation and compliance frameworks, Zoe stumbled, so I jumped in with the answers. Later that day, she cornered me in the office kitchen. "Don't ever make me look stupid in front of clients again," she hissed, jabbing a finger at my chest. "I was just answering their technical questions," I replied. "Next time, write down the answer and slide it to me. I'm the face of these deals now. You're just the back-end coder. Remember your place." I should have quit that day. Instead, I swallowed my pride and kept working, telling myself I was doing it for the company I helped build, not for Zoe's ego. The healthcare contract ended up being worth $2.3 million over 3 years. But guess whose name was on the commission report? Not mine. Last year, I discovered Zoe was falsifying her business development metrics. She'd take credit for contract renewals that were automatic, claim prospects that other team members had cultivated, and fabricate client meetings that never happened to hit her quarterly targets. I showed Elena the evidence, a detailed spreadsheet analysis that took me a week to compile, and she dismissed it as aggressive business development. I'd spent the previous quarter quietly documenting everything, building my case, keeping receipts, I wasn't planning to use any of it, but something told me to be prepared. Call it intuition from 8 years of watching my sister operate. Then one Tuesday, I saw Elena's email arrive. It was 4:17 p.m., and I'd just closed a critical security vulnerability in our main platform. Without Zoe's help, we weren't the type of siblings who checked in daily, so I figured it had to be about the quarterly board meeting. I opened the email and continued organizing my notes, half reading as I saved my files. Your services are no longer required. Severance details to follow. I froze, my cursor hovering over the save button. 2 sentences, delivered with the cold efficiency of a system notification. I sat there for a minute, her words burning in my brain. The message was clinical and impersonal, like terminating a software license. After all the years I'd invested in building her company, all the family gatherings I'd missed, all the relationships I'd sacrificed, this is how she ends it? A 2 sentence email? The board meeting scheduled for Friday wasn't just a regular quarterly review. It was when we'd discuss next year's technical roadmap and allocate resources across teams. Cutting me out of that was cutting me out of the company's future. Through my office window, I could see Zoe and Elena's office, both of them looking at a whiteboard, nodding. Elena never consulted with me like that anymore. Now it all made sense. They weren't just planning next quarter. They were planning my exit. I closed my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A dozen replies ran through my mind, each one angrier than the last. But finally, I just typed 2 words. Understood. Forwarded. If she wanted to end things, fine. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. But if she thought she could cut me out without consequences, she had another thing coming. I pulled up the investment agreement from my desk drawer. There was my signature in blue ink next to Elena's on the seed funding document. With methodical precision, I drafted an email to our company lawyer and attached the relevant clauses about investor withdrawal rights. The sound of my keyboard felt like hammering nails into a coffin. I took screenshots of everything, then opened my email and wrote a message to my personal attorney. I attached the screenshots and typed, "Need to meet tomorrow. Company situation changing dramatically. Let's discuss my options." I hit send, locked my computer, and walked out of the building without looking back. If my sister wanted to play this game, I wasn't going to let her control my future. The next day, I moved quickly, canceled my meetings, cleared my calendar, and sent an email to Elena confirming my intention to step away from operations while requesting a full financial and technical audit of the systems I'd built. No emotional appeals, no attempts to salvage our relationship, just the cold, precise language of an investor protecting their assets. 8 years of my life in that company. 8 years of missed vacations, skipped friends' weddings, and postponed personal plans. For what? To be dismissed with a 2 sentence email? I'd turned down a senior engineering position at Microsoft after graduation to help Elena launch the business. And for what? So Zoe could waltz in and take over? I quietly started the process to withdraw my seed investment based on my minority shareholder rights. This wasn't an emotional reaction. It was strategic risk management. If they were cutting me out, I needed to protect my financial stake. Made several calls to my attorney to initiate the separation process. It wasn't personal. It was business. Elena taught me that lesson herself. While waiting for my lawyer's response, I backed up every piece of code I'd written, every system architecture diagram, every technical specification document, anything that might prove my contributions. Not to steal intellectual property, but to protect my legacy. When you've spent 8 years building software systems, you know exactly where the technical debt is buried. An hour after I sent my email, Zoe texted me. "We both know Elena's been carrying you for years. Don't worry, I've got plenty of ideas to modernize that spaghetti code you've been maintaining." She should have put me in charge of product from day one. I didn't respond. No point engaging with someone who couldn't tell a firewall from a database. I just took a screenshot for my records and continued working on my exit strategy. Zoe had always been a talker, not a builder. Her ideas typically involved buzzwords she'd picked up at conferences without understanding the underlying technology. The next morning, I got a text from Marcus, our lead security engineer who'd been with us for 5 years. Elena just called an emergency all hands. Announced Zoe's taking over as CTO effective immediately. The woman couldn't explain a basic SQL injection if her life depended on it. Apparently, Zoe had been telling Elena I was planning to launch a competing product and copying proprietary code for months. Complete fabrication, but Zoe had always had Elena wrapped around her finger. I spent that night documenting every contribution I'd made to the codebase, taking screenshots of commit history, and archiving every technical decision I'd implemented. I knew exactly how this would play out. 48 hours later, my phone exploded with notifications. 67 missed calls from Elena, dozens from my Aunt Vivian, and several from my parents. I scrolled through the panicked texts, desperate voicemails, and increasingly urgent emails. Elena's messages started with clinical, business-like inquiries, but as the hours passed and my silence continued, they became more frantic, her words tinged with something I hadn't heard from her in years: desperation. Maya, we need to discuss the repository access. It's urgent. Call me about the AWS credentials. This is important. Maya, this isn't a game. The entire platform is at stake. Our cloud services provider had left a message vibrating with anxiety. Maya, we need to speak immediately. There are critical access issues with your company's infrastructure. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small smile. I'd given them a head start, but reality was finally catching up. And I was just getting started. See, what Elena and Zoe didn't realize was that 3 years ago, when I rebuilt our entire technical infrastructure, I'd made myself essential to the operation. Not intentionally, I'd actually documented everything thoroughly. But some things you just can't transfer in a day. Things like the complex authentication system I'd designed, the intricate deployment pipelines I'd configured, and the institutional knowledge about our security protocols that I'd accumulated over years. By the fifth day, the messages had escalated from concerned to desperate. My Aunt Vivian's voicemails were breathless pleas, her words tumbling over each other. My mother tried a gentler approach. Maya, honey, I don't know what's happening with the company, but I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Please call your sister. I didn't answer. Mom meant well, but I knew my sister too well to think this was just a misunderstanding. On the sixth day, I received an alert from our company's code repository. I opened it carefully, bracing myself for whatever new crisis had emerged. As I scanned the logs, my jaw dropped. Elena and Zoe had attempted to grant full administrator access to an outside development agency, trying to bypass all the security protocols I'd implemented. They'd even initiated the process to migrate our entire codebase to a new repository where I wouldn't have access. The only reason it hadn't succeeded was because the authentication system required multi-factor approval for such significant changes, a security feature I'd implemented after a close call with a data breach 2 years ago. A detail Elena had apparently forgotten in her rush to push me out. That was it. My sister wasn't just trying to remove me from the company. She and Zoe were trying to erase my contributions entirely, cleanly, permanently. They probably thought I'd be too shocked or hurt to act. They didn't realize that by crossing that line, they'd given me the perfect justification to strike back. I took a deep breath, then called my lawyer. We had an extensive discussion, and by the end of it, the wheels were in motion for something much bigger than just withdrawing my seed investment. They've made this straightforward for us, my lawyer said. Attempted intellectual property theft is a clear breach of fiduciary duty. But are you certain this is the path you want to take? Once we file these papers, reconciliation becomes nearly impossible. I didn't hesitate. I'm certain. They started this war. I'm just making sure I win it. The next morning, I compiled every document I had related to the company's technical infrastructure. I spent hours creating a comprehensive dossier, highlighting every shortcut, every security compromise, every technical debt Zoe and Elena had insisted on over my objections. Years of suppressed frustration fueled my focus. Elena's habit of cutting corners on security audits to save money. Zoe's insistence on rushing features to market before proper testing. The consulting fees paid to my aunt's graphic design company that never delivered a functional website. The offshore development team that had access to production systems against all security best practices. It was all there, meticulously documented. When I finished, I had a damning collection of evidence. I filed formal complaints with our investors, detailing potential breaches of fiduciary duty, and froze the code repositories pending a full security audit. I also prepared documentation for our largest clients explaining the potential security implications of recent management changes, attaching the most concerning pieces from my dossier. I didn't know if it would work, but I was determined to find out. Finally, as a strategic move, I sent a detailed technical risk assessment to our largest client, a hospital network whose CISO had become a mentor to me over the years. Dr. Chen had been in cybersecurity for decades and had given Elena her first major contract. He valued technical excellence and transparent security practices above all else. I knew he wouldn't appreciate learning how corners had been cut on his organization's data security. I expected retaliation, but I was prepared. I'd already secured all my personal finances, moved my assets to new accounts, and ensured my name was off any company credit lines. Let them come at me. I was no longer exposed. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking Lake Union, watching the water shimmer under the city lights. Part of me felt a twinge of regret about how things had escalated, but another part, The part that remembered every dismissal, every time Zoe was favored, every devaluation of my contributions, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus at the office. Complete chaos here today. Your cousin tried to deploy to production and somehow crashed the entire platform. Your sister's been in crisis meetings all day. Hope whatever's happening works out, Maya. I smiled grimly. They were discovering just how much they'd relied on me, and it had only been 6 days. That night, my phone rang again. Mom. I hesitated before answering. Maya, I know you're hurt, and I understand why, but can we talk? Just you and me. I paused, considering my options. Despite everything, I didn't want to drag her into the middle of this mess. She'd always tried to keep peace between Elena and me when things got tense. All right, I finally said. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, I met my mother at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. She was already there, waiting at a window table, watching the door. When she saw me, she straightened slightly, but her expression remained worried. Mom had always been the mediator in family conflicts. She'd perfected the art of neutrality during the many arguments between Elena and me growing up. Maya, what's happening? She asked, keeping her voice low. Elena's falling apart. Vivian says the company is in crisis. They think you're trying to sabotage everything. And Zoe is just making it all worse, promising things she can't deliver. She deserved to know the truth, but I didn't want to burden her with details that would only cause more family strain. They tried to erase me completely, I said. Elena and Zoe were attempting to copy all my code and systems to a new repository, trying to cut me out of the picture entirely. I'm just ensuring they can't appropriate my work on their way out. Her eyes widened. That can't be right. Elena wouldn't just... No, there must be some misunderstanding. What about Zoe? Would she? I asked pointedly. She looked away, unable to deny it. Zoe had always been manipulative, even with her. She'd borrowed my mother's car in college and returned it with a dented fender, claiming it had been like that before. Elena covered for her, of course. I pushed a thin folder across the table. It contained carefully selected screenshots, just enough to make my point without overwhelming her. Repository access logs, suspicious code transfers, and emails where Elena and Zoe had explicitly asked an outside developer to expedite the migration process. She flipped through the papers slowly. Oh, Maya, this is deliberate. They were really trying to lock you out. Yes, I said, leaning back. And that's just the beginning. They've been compromising on security protocols for months, maybe years. I found evidence they gave production database access to an offshore development team we've never properly vetted. I leaned closer. Mom, if I hadn't acted when I did, our healthcare clients could have been exposed to serious vulnerabilities. Patient data could have been compromised. She closed the folder and pressed her palm flat against it. You have to talk to Elena, she said firmly. There must be some explanation. Your sister's not usually this reckless. And Zoe? I asked. She didn't answer. I gave them a chance to explain. You know what Elena did? She fired me with a 2-sentence email, then put Zoe in my position the very next day. Just please don't destroy everything, she said. Vivian says investors are already asking questions. If this escalates, I don't know what will happen to the company. I'm not the one who started this, Mom, but I promise you, I'm going to finish it. That evening, I received a notification from our code repository service. The emergency freeze on code changes had been implemented. My attorney had leveraged the intellectual property clauses I'd insisted on in our operating agreement, the ones requiring my approval for major architectural changes, along with evidence of unauthorized access attempts. The service had flagged multiple suspicious access patterns, with several large-scale code extraction attempts still pending. I pictured Elena and Zoe in that glass-walled conference room, watching the deploy pipeline stall, their carefully constructed plan unraveling hour by hour. I wasn't just protecting my code. I was exposing the fundamental flaws in their leadership. I knew the business well enough to understand what a code freeze meant. Client updates wouldn't go out. Bug fixes would be delayed. The continuous integration pipeline they relied on for client deliverables would be paralyzed. It was the technical equivalent of cardiac arrest. I woke up the next morning to my phone vibrating constantly. My email inbox was flooded with notifications from our repository service, my lawyer, and panicked messages from Elena's business partners. The security audit had begun sooner than expected, and it was clearly revealing problems. I scrolled through the latest alerts from the repository. They'd frozen access to over 300,000 lines of code across multiple repositories and flagged another 120,000 lines for suspicious commit patterns going back 3 months. It was a technical stranglehold, enough to halt product development completely. Elena had left 5 voicemails overnight, each one more desperate than the last. Maya, please. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're destroying everything we built. Call me back immediately. We can fix this. I deleted the messages without responding. An hour later, Mom called again. Maya, what did you do? She asked, her voice even but strained. I did what was necessary, I replied calmly. They're in complete panic mode, Maya. Elena's talking about lawyers, about suing for sabotage. Vivian is beside herself, and Zoe is making wild promises about fixing everything if they just give her complete control. I wasn't surprised. They'd never been good at handling technical crises. I gave them a chance. Elena made her move. Zoe took my position, and I protected my work. I'm not backing down. There was a long silence on the other end. Fine. Meet with them, she said finally. One last time. For me. I hesitated. I owed Mom at least that much. All right, I said. But this is the last time. As I hung up, my lawyer called with an update. The repository's preliminary audit had already uncovered enough red flags to warrant a more thorough investigation. Elena and Zoe were looking at potential intellectual property violations if things continued this way. You need to decide how far you want to take this, he said. Right now, you've got leverage. They're desperate. This might be the time to negotiate a settlement that cuts you loose with your fair share. I considered it. A settlement would be cleaner, faster. But something in me resisted. This wasn't just about money anymore. We met at Elena's condominium in downtown Seattle that evening. I'd been to countless dinners and strategy sessions in this sleek high-rise apartment, discussed product roadmaps on that balcony overlooking the Sound, celebrated our first million in revenue at that dining table. Now it felt like entering hostile territory. My mother opened the door with a nervous smile and quick hug. She looked exhausted. Inside, Elena was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, projecting confidence despite the situation. Zoe sat at the kitchen island like it was a throne, scrolling through her phone, feigning indifference. Let's get this over with, Elena said. I sat down at the dining table, noticing how every award and press mention in the apartment highlighted Elena's achievements, with my contributions minimized or erased. Had it always been that way? Or was I just seeing it clearly now? So what's this about? I asked. Elena turned to me, face flushed. What the hell do you think you're doing, Maya? Freezing the repositories, triggering security audits. You're trying to destroy everything we built. I met her gaze directly. I'm destroying things? After you fired me without warning? You think I wouldn't notice unauthorized access to my code? You think I'm just going to sit back while you and Zoe try to erase my contributions to the company I helped build? Zoe looked up from her phone, pointing at me. You've always been jealous of Elena's vision. You've been undermining my strategy since day one. Elena's face hardened. You have no idea what you've done, she said. I've got demos scheduled with potential investors, commitments to clients. Zoe has a completely new direction planned for the product. If you freeze these repositories, it could sink everything. That's not my problem, I shot back. You made your decision when you tried to push me out of the company and replace me with Zoe. I'm just protecting my work. There was a long silence. Then Zoe leaned back with a smirk. Don't worry, Elena. I'll rebuild the entire platform now that Maya's out of the picture. Her code is outdated anyway. I've got friends at Google who can help us create a much more scalable architecture. I laughed. Zoe had never even looked at our codebase, let alone understood it. Zoe's right, Elena said. We were planning to refactor the entire platform anyway. This is just accelerating our timeline. I looked at my sister and saw something I'd never noticed before. She was terrified. Beneath all the threats and posturing, she was desperately afraid that her company was slipping away. And instead of facing reality, she was doubling down on the fantasy that Zoe could somehow save everything. Elena leaned in, voice low and threatening. Fine. You want to play hardball? You want to tear down what we spent 8 years building? I'll show you what real scorched earth looks like. I held her gaze. I'd come too far to back down now. Mom stepped between us. Stop, both of you. This isn't solving anything. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. You wanted me here, Mom. I came. But I'm done trying to reason with them. I turned and walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. As I waited for the elevator, my phone buzzed with a new email. A message from my lawyer. Elena and Zoe had just filed a lawsuit claiming I had sabotaged the company and illegally locked them out of critical systems. I let out a short laugh and slipped my phone back in my pocket. So this was how they wanted to play it? Fine. I'd given them a chance to walk away. Now I'd make sure they had nothing left to fight for. The lawsuit hit me harder than expected. Elena and Zoe had gone scorched earth, accusing me of everything from corporate sabotage to intellectual property theft. Their claims were absurd, but the stakes were real. If they convinced a judge I'd illegally restricted access to company systems, I could be liable for substantial damages. I'd expected them to be desperate, but I hadn't expected them to be this reckless. It was like they were begging for full discovery. I spent the next week buried in legal documents, my attorney working overtime to counter each new motion they filed. They had even tried to drag our parents into it, pressuring them to testify against me, probably hoping to break my resolve through family pressure. Then, 3 days before the first court date, I received a message from our lead security engineer. Maya, we need to talk privately. There are things you should know. I met Marcus that night at a small pub in Fremont. He was already there when I arrived, looking nervous. He waved me over, glancing around the room. Maya, I shouldn't be here. If they find out, he fidgeted with his beer glass. The security audit triggered some serious red flags. With the lawsuit and everything happening, I could lose my professional certifications if I'm associated with this. I need to protect myself. Just tell me what this is about, I said, sitting across from him. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Your cousin, she's been exposing client data for months. Insecure APIs, misconfigured cloud storage, improper access controls. Elena only found out recently, but she's been covering it up. It's bad. I'd expected some technical negligence, but this sounded much worse. How bad? Potential HIPAA violations, maybe FTC territory. I've been documenting the issues and trying to fix them quietly, but this lawsuit, if it goes to discovery, it all comes out. I can't risk my career, my reputation. He slid a flash drive across the table. Everything you need is on here. Access logs, misconfigured servers, vulnerability reports. Your cousin has been systematically undermining our security protocols for months, and your sister has been helping hide it. It's enough to trigger regulatory investigations. That night, I reviewed the files. It was all there. Patient data from our healthcare clients had been exposed through improperly secured APIs, with Zoe's fingerprints all over the changes and Elena's approval on most of them. There were security audits that had been falsified, vulnerability reports that had been buried, and even evidence that Zoe had given an outside marketing agency access to production environments containing sensitive client data. Elena had signed off on all of it, either knowingly or in willful ignorance. The next morning, I sent everything to my lawyer with a note. Let's end this. By the time the court date arrived, Elena and Zoe were cornered. Their repositories were locked, their client relationships in jeopardy, and now, with this new evidence, they were facing potential regulatory investigations. Elena looked exhausted as she entered the courtroom, her usual confidence shattered. Zoe wasn't even there. She'd apparently flown to California the night before for emergency meetings with advisors. The judge took less than 2 hours to rule. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was dismissed, and the court ordered a full technical and security audit of the company's systems. I watched Elena's face as reality set in. She hadn't just lost the lawsuit. She'd lost everything. Outside the courtroom, she approached me, shoulders slumped. Maya, you have to believe me. I didn't know how severe the security issues were with Zoe's changes. I was just trying to give her room to grow. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You chose her over me, I said quietly. Every time. And now you're paying for it. I walked away, leaving her standing there, suddenly looking much older than her 35 years. A week later, Mom called. She'd helped Elena find a smaller apartment in Ballard. She didn't ask for my help, and I didn't offer it. But I transferred enough for 3 months' rent, more for Mom's sake than Elena's. Did you know about Zoe? She's ruined the company, Maya. And Elena let her do it. She chose Zoe over you, over her own company's integrity. I could hear the disappointment in her voice. It wasn't just me who'd been betrayed. As for the business, it had imploded spectacularly. The audit revealed that Zoe had been compromising security protocols for months. The company was facing potential regulatory investigations, and most of their major clients had terminated their contracts when the security issues came to light. The Portland office was closed. The Seattle headquarters downsized to a single floor. Zoe had disappeared to California. Last Mom heard, she was trying to get a job at a friend's startup, ignoring Elena's calls, with no apparent remorse for the damage she'd caused. I signed the final papers dissolving my connection to the company, severing the last technical and financial ties between us. With my settlement and industry reputation intact, I was already 4 weeks into establishing my own cybersecurity consultancy in Vancouver, British Columbia. Different country, different market, similar industry. I'd secured modest office space, brought over 2 trusted engineers from the Seattle operation, and started building something that was entirely mine. No family drama, no nepotism, just technical excellence and sound business practices. 2 months later, Elena called directly. Her voice was different, subdued but still with that undertone of entitlement. Maya, we need to talk. The situation, it's dire. Zoe has completely abandoned ship and disappeared to Silicon Valley. We were wrong. We need your help to rebuild the platform. I let her words hang in the air. Part of me felt vindicated. The other part was just tired of the whole saga. I'm sorry, Elena. That chapter of my life is closed. Come on, Maya. We have nothing left. We were wrong about you. Wrong about Zoe. We can start over. Rebuild the company together. The right way this time. I still have connections throughout the industry. I took a deep breath. Number, you made your choice. Now you have to live with it. I've moved on. Our parents are worried about their retirement, the investment they made in the company. Her voice cracked for a moment. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but quickly suppressed it. She'd been manipulating me with guilt for years. Not this time. I already talked to Mom about that. She and Dad diversified their investments last year on my advice. They'll be fine. You can't just abandon your family, Maya. After everything I've done for you, I almost laughed at that. Everything you've done for me? Elena, I worked 8 years building your company while you handed everything to Zoe on a silver platter. I'm done. I hung up and blocked her number. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have her in my life again in some limited capacity, but I would never again tie my future to her judgment or put my professional reputation in her hands. My sister taught me one valuable lesson after all. In business, loyalty is only as good as the contract it's written on. Family is something else entirely. What do you guys think? Did I do the right thing by refusing to help her start over?